What does it mean to stir each other up? To stir people into a response, maybe that's emotionally or physically, to stir up the masses or the general population, to move people to respond in a certain way, or to move people into a certain action. Some use the word activism, if you will. What does it mean to stir people up these days? Is this a good thing? I would argue that we live in a world right now where, generally speaking, we have two larger factions regularly pushing and pulling to stir people into a certain type of belief or into a certain type of thinking or way of going about things. I could ask you, if people were to give you an honest evaluation of your life, or maybe just simply took a look at your Facebook account or your Instagram, what would they say you motivate people to do? How are you stirring the world into a certain direction? And is this a good thing? I would argue that despite our failure to stir people in a productive or useful way, more often than not, we are called, in fact, to stir and motivate certain actions in this world. I want to start by bringing up the verse of the day today is that of Hebrews 10:24 and 25, and it says, "Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." You see, as Christians, we are not just called to be godly or to follow Christ or be Christ-like, but an interesting take here in Hebrews is that part of what it means to be a Christian, part of what it means, if you will, to be an ambassador for Christ in this world, is that we should be a movement maker, that we should be stirring up the world around us, that it shouldn't be calm and if you will, calm waters and just lazy and relaxed in the midst of Christians in this world, but rather in an odd way, we should be a jostling force in the world around us, that we should be stirring up not necessarily controversial actions. And it would be easy to jump to, in the current climate, to jump to something like how we stir each other politically, and what does it mean to be a Christian and deal with politics. Do we have a good answer right now, or is that just a really controversial discussion at the moment where Christians, as I've argued lately, feel homeless, politically homeless in the current political environment? So what do Christians act? What kind of force are they in the world around us? What should we look like? And Hebrews is suggesting that by our actions, by the way that we live, we should be stirring the pot, we should be stirring people and motivating those around us to do loving and good works. That simply being around the church, if you will, simply being around a body of Christians should be a motivating factor to take part in God's mission on earth in all the ways that sees fit. We could certainly look at Jesus as an example of what that might look like, because Jesus spent most of his missionary recorded years doing things like healing the sick and feeding the hungry and teaching those who didn't have access, essentially dealing with the common people as opposed to the religious elite or the rich, if you will, those who had access and had less privilege. Jesus spent most of his life doing what many of us would call social justice. Now, the irony is that there has been a divide or a split, if you will, between Christianity and this concept of social justice because it has been politicized. I would argue that as much as social justice or social justice warriors has become a bit of a negative term, I would argue that Christians should be maybe some of the most active advocates, social justice warriors, and activists out there. Not in a controversial manner as we are used to seeing, but rather that our lives would be so filled with mission work, so filled with love and almost unavoidable good works, that others would feel the contagion of trying to take part in it, that they would want to be a part of this thing that maybe they don't understand but seems to be a positive force in the world. I feel like that is what we are charged to do as Christians. And you notice that right after it says this word, it says that we should not neglect to meet together as some are in the habit of doing. And for the longest time, I don't know that this word here in America would have been as relevant because we live in a Christian nation, or at least a post-Christian nation. Now, today, more than ever, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of political divide, in the midst of so many reasons that people are finding not to meet together as the body of Christ, I would argue that now more than ever we should be charged to find our way back together as the body and the family of Christ in a way that is positive, in a way that is both edifying and fulfilling and uplifting for its members, strengthening and emboldening and educating and so forth, and at the same time that ideology that you can get more done with many hands, that would be the exact concept or proof of the goodness of the church, is that by meeting regularly and coming together regularly, the church would once again be an advocate for change, a motivating factor in society and culture that says, hey, we can make a difference and we should make a difference, starting with ourselves by being busy doing good, loving works so that others catch the fire and want to take part as well. And that is the encouragement, that in the midst of this chaotic time and this crazy world, in the midst of political divide and pandemic fears and social isolation and everything else that the world throws our way, I would challenge us as Christians to come together, to begin to meet again with purpose and with passion. And there's a way that we can do that respectfully to the world around us, not necessarily badgering or arguing heavy-handedly about our rights, but rather saying, if the mask is the stumbling block, then we will gladly wear a mask in the world around us as we do our good and loving works, so that we are not a hindrance to the gospel, so that we are not a hindrance to the good news that we are charged to share both in word and in action and deed. And that once again we can build the church back up, that we can find our way back to strengthening the numbers in the house of the Lord, and that house would begin to move the world in a positive way because we become more concerned with the good works and deeds and the good news that we share, rather than the challenge or the opposition that we have been accustomed and grown to be known for. So that is my challenge for you, is to not forget who you are, to not forget where you come from, to find your way back to a home body, a home family within the body of Christ in the church, and let us all, in a unified nature, come back together in humility and peace and begin to serve this world well again.